So this episode is brought to you by TimberLad. TimberLad is a bespoke timber and woodworking company. They can do handmade products and commissions of any size, and you can find them on Instagram at TimberLad and on their Etsy store by searching TimberLad. And I know, Chris, you've got a couple of pieces from them.
I have a sign for the Riot's Lair, my little gym. It's a really cool little piece, nice little bit of craftsmanship, and it will add 10 kilograms to your deadlift. Not based on actual science, but it might do.
What more would you want? So that TimberLad is sponsoring Silly Goose Gang episode 48 with Navy SEAL sniper and New York Times best-selling author, coffee aficionado, martial artist, deep thinker, and all-round good guy, Jack Carr. And we hope you really enjoy this episode, sponsored by TimberLad.
The Silly Goose Gang podcast.
There it works. Yep.
Hey, there it goes.
Yeah.
Nice. I see it right there. Going the call.
There you go. We got it eventually. This is a strange introduction, I guess.
No, at least when I'm working, that's the main thing.
Ali, this is no, I don't usually speak at the start. It's usually Ali doing the intros. But Ali I just seen his face going a little red there as he was trying to figure out how to record with a New York Times best-selling author and former Navy SEAL breathing down his neck. And he performed well.
Yeah, you did. Performing under pressure. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, totally. It looks like it's all working good though, which is the main thing.
Good marks, man.
We are happy.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Jack. It's a pleasure for us. Yeah, Ali's the big reader of the pair of us. So he's teaching me about your books forever. I'm the stupid one who can't read. So
luckily for you, there's audiobooks. And people are loving the audiobooks. Ray Porter is the guy that does the audio, and he's an amazing narrator. He was on that show Sons of Anarchy, that motorcycle gang show. He was in there, and he's just a fantastic narrator. And I'm not an audiobook guy. I like a physical book in my hand, and so I didn't really have anybody in mind when Simon & Schuster asked me, who do you want to read this thing? And I was like, well, okay, how long do I have to pick? And they said, kind of buy into business today. And I was like, oh, geez, because it was like where I live, it was like noon, so it was getting close to end of business in New York. So I just started listening to samples, and then I heard Ray Porter, and I was like, oh, well, this guy sounds really good. He could do this. And then listened to a couple more samples of his, and then I sent it to New York and said, hey, let's do Ray Porter. And what I didn't realize is that narrators bring an audience with them. I just liked his voice. I had no idea that people will follow a narrator from project to project. And I happened to choose, there's like a group of maybe 4 or 5, maybe they're like kind of like known as the top narrators for the genre. And he is one of those. And I had no idea. So I chose wisely, even though I had no clue that I was choosing wisely. So he brought a whole audience with him. And then the first one was up for Audiobook of the Year in 2018. It was up there with Ruth Ware and Stephen King. And we got to go to New York. So we got to hang out together and go to the awards and all that stuff. So it was amazing. And he's been fantastic.
That is something that I would never have thought that would have been, have...
Nope, you froze on that end.
Chris is froze up there.
You're
frozen. You hear me still,
that's
Jack?
okay. I got you. So, so the narrator piece is it's the fastest growing segment of publishing, from what I understand, is the audiobook side of the house, and which is also, I think, a podcast audience naturally gravitates towards audiobooks. So when I did the Rogan podcast, the audiobook was the one that went through the roof, both for the terminal list and my third one that was coming out right around that time, Savage Son. But I think, podcast listeners are also people that are more apt to be audiobook listeners as well.
Definitely. I've unlike I've not read your audiobooks, but I've read the 3 of them. I actually finished Savage Son on Monday. Man,
thank you.
That is a roller coaster of a book.
Thank you.
Genuinely, all 3 of them are fantastic. Obviously, building up over the time, but that third one was a serious roller coaster. One of the questions that I'd kind of lined up to ask you was, had the novel writing always been something you'd wanted to do from the start, or was it off the back of being in the Navy SEALs? Kind of what drove you down the writing kind of path?
Yeah, so I always wanted to write since I was a little kid. There were two things I wanted to do in life, and one was to serve my country in uniform, specifically as a Navy SEAL, and then the other was to write fiction in this genre. And they're related in that as I was growing up, my mother was a librarian, so we grew up surrounded by books and this love of reading. And a lot of the books that I gravitated to back then had protagonists with backgrounds I wanted in real life one day. So I'm reading books by guys like A.J. Quinnell and Tom Clancy and Mark Olden and David Morrell and Nelson DeMille and all these guys who typically back then their protagonists had Vietnam experience, either in Army Special Forces or as SEALs or as CIA operatives or something. But I always knew that one day after my time in the military, I'd write those kind of novels because back then, in the 80s, you couldn't just Google Navy SEAL or Google Army Special Forces or Marine Recon or something like that and get information. You had to actually go out to the library and do research. And back then, there was hardly anything written about special operations. There was a few things here and there, but you could actually study it all. Now you couldn't possibly do that. So to kind of supplement the nonfiction study that I was doing, I started reading these novels and absolutely love them, and just remember the magic I had of reading those novels as a kid. So I wanted to do the same thing someday after I got out of the military. So all those novels I read growing up, that provided this foundation, this base. Then all the academic study I did of warfare and terrorism and insurgencies and counterinsurgencies, all that coupled together with my experience downrange in Iraq and Afghanistan and being able to take those emotions and feelings behind certain events I was involved with and apply those to a completely fictional narrative. So it all kind of came together at the right time in the right place in order to start creating these novels as I transitioned from military service. So both serving and writing were the two things that I wanted to do with my life.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Chris has just jumped back in again, another technical issue there.
No idea what.
You just froze up. It's okay. We're talking books, so you'd have been bored anyway, so don't worry about it.
That's fine. Stand books. I like to have pretty things. I like physical things. So I have like a small vinyl collection, and I do have some books. So I have. I'm just looking at my bookshelf. So I have a couple of books. I have a Jocko book. I have 100 Deadly Skills from Clint Emerson.
There you go. Yeah, awesome.
I have Joe Struthers. Shout out to Joe Struthers, a former guest as well. Appel his books. I like things. I just when your TV series comes out, I will be the #1 watcher. That's nice. A nice segue. That's a nice segue.
That was very natural. Yeah, it's exactly when it's coming out as classified, but we're working on the scripts right now, and it's an 8-part series on Amazon starring Chris Pratt. So they have a writer's room that they put together, and there's a main screenwriter, and then I'm an advisor. So they send me the scripts. The first one, me and the screenwriter, we worked on together. And so what happens in this case anyway, and it's probably different depending, each project is probably different, but this is my only experience. So they take this script, and then they take the star, Chris Pratt, and they take the director, Anton Fuqua, and all three of those guys, screenwriter, director, star, all took that to Amazon, to Netflix, to Disney, to Apple, to all these different new streaming services and old ones, and then they do the pitch. And it was crazy. They got in some sort of a bidding war, and it was amazing. But Amazon ended up picking it up, so now it's going to be an 8-part series on Amazon. And of course, it can still always go off the rails. So I don't want to sound overly confident, because the day they start filming, things could derail. So at this point, it just still looks good. And working on the scripts, just did the 6th episode the other day, and I'll see the 7th and the 8th one here pretty soon. But I couldn't be happier with how it's turning out. And I feel very, very fortunate that it's going to a series, which is what I wanted, with the exact star that I wanted, with the exact director that I wanted. So I feel very fortunate.
Chris Pratt seems like I'm not really one for celebrities, Hollywood types, but he seems like such a cool guy. He just seems like a really, really down to earth guy. He's totally normal, and he's I also got very lucky in that right before my first novel came out, I got a call from an old buddy of mine in the SEAL teams, and
he calls out of the blue and was like, "Hey man, I always wanted to thank you. I haven't talked to him in like 5 years or something." And he said, "Hey man, I always wanted to thank you for what you did for me and the teams." And in my mind, I was thinking like, "Man, did I bail him out of jail? You know, what did I do? And he's like, "You're the only person that sat me down in your office and talked to me about transition. And you introduced me to people in the private sector, and I've never forgotten it. And I always wanted to thank you." And of course, I was like, "Yeah, no problem, man." And he's like, "Hey, I heard you wrote a book." And I said, "Yeah, it's coming out in a few months." And he said, "Well, can I give a copy to a friend of mine?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no problem. I'll send you an early copy. Get these galley copies that come out a few months in advance, and I'll send you one. And who's the other one for?" And he said, "Chris Pratt." It's like, oh, that's interesting, because that's why I envisioned playing the main character as I was writing it. So it's just crazy how that worked out. So Chris read it, and a couple weeks later called and wanted to option it for a film or a series. So it started way back then, before the first book was even on shelves.
That's crazy.
Isn't it amazing how life works out? You know, these things. You know, we've had a few of these small kind of coincidences that, you know, a person leads to a person doing the podcast.
Yeah.
You know, these things, amazing. I wonder if that's like a, you know, like, I don't want to sound like a hippie, but like putting out good vibes and doing the right thing, doing the work. Is it? You know, I wonder if that's, you know, part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be, because without that, it doesn't happen. Like, if I hadn't sat down in my office, I hadn't cared enough to do that, but it was just natural to do. It's not like I tried to do it because I thought one day it might pay off or something like that. It was just the right thing to do that I would have done for any good guy in the teams. And then, yeah, there's a whole bunch of other things that have to come into play as well. So no matter what we're doing in life, we have to do it as best as we possibly can. And for me, that, I mean, I don't know another way to do anything. I guess it's just kind of natural to go all in on everything that I do. But it's just, to this point anyway, has happened to work out. Although I didn't plan it like that, but it happened to work out that. But if I hadn't done those things, hadn't gone all in on being the best SEAL I could possibly be, the best operator I could possibly be, the best leader I could possibly be, hadn't done that academic study of warfare and insurgencies and counterinsurgencies, and hadn't tried to make myself the best operator possible, then some of these other things wouldn't have happened. They would have just kind of died on the vine, I think. Yeah. But it's just all kind of very, very natural progression.
Yeah, love that. Sorry, Al, I was just going to say, I know I love the quote, and I don't know who originally said it, but, you know, the way you do anything is the way you do everything. You know, love that. I love that quote. You know, it's all in. Do the best job you can. It doesn't matter if you're, you know, washing the dishes or, you know, doing an operation in Iraq. I guess, you know, it's do everything 100%, all in.
Yeah, no, you have to. Yeah, I don't know another way to do it. And you know, my wife would probably be like, "Man, can't you just slow down, or can't you just do something? Can you just put your feet up for a second?" And I haven't been able to yet. But that's just how it is, you know. And that's kind of the advice that I give anybody. Especially, I get a lot of questions about writing nowadays, and what I tell people is, hey, you have to make that product the best it can possibly be. So before you start worrying about an agent or a publisher, if you should self-publish, if you don't do a traditional publisher, or how are you going to market it, or how are you going to get the book done, get it as good as you can possibly get it, and then start allocating some bandwidth towards those other things. But until you have the product, no matter what it is, as good as it can possibly be, then don't allocate bandwidth elsewhere. Make the product, and in this case the book, as good as it can possibly be. Then take a breath and plan that road ahead, because you have to have that product first. That's the main thing.
Yeah, totally. With the product you're talking there, Jack, how much of Reese, obviously you said you kind of always had the idea of Chris Pratt in your head. How much of you's in Reese? How much of Reese is in you? How much of it is a composite of guys you've worked with in the team? Where did the sort of metamorphosis, I guess, of Reese come from?
Yeah, so his background is very similar to mine in that he's a prior SEAL enlisted sniper, which I was. He becomes an officer at some point, which I did. And then when the reader meets him in the first novel, he's at that stage where, after this deployment to Afghanistan, he's decided to get out because he's done everything he can possibly do in the SEAL teams at the tactical level. And if he stays in, now he's moving on to that operational level, and then eventually that strategic level. So for me, as an 04 in the SEAL teams, that was the last time, my last deployment to Iraq was the last time I'd ever tactically maneuver guys on the battlefield. After that, you do a staff job, and then maybe you come back as a SEAL team CO, and yeah, you're a leader, but you're back in that tactical operations center. You're not going out with the guys, and if you are, you're just getting in the way. And so I done everything I was going to do that I wanted to do in the SEAL teams. My family needed me. We have 3 kiddos. And so it was time. It was very evident that it was just time to get out and move on. So I got to take all those emotions and experiences from downrange and apply them to a fictional novel to include thinking about moving on, taking care of that family. And then, of course, I fictionalize it all from there. But my protagonist, James Reese, he is a much better shot than I am. He is much better at jiu-jitsu than I am. He's much stronger, much faster, much wittier than I could ever hope to be. So I think there's a lot to be said for adding that authenticity piece. And the authenticity is kind of like an overused word, but it's also, there's not a better one to use yet anyway. And so I do put a lot of that past experience into the novels. And I think that's what made it stand out, because Simon & Schuster sees thousands of these books every year in this genre. And something made this one stand out, the first one, The Terminalist, that they saw. And I think that's the emotions and the feelings from events downrange that I brought to a fictional novel, because even though it's fiction, it reads like the emotions feel real, because they're real emotions that I just put into and applied to a fictional narrative. So that was a very long way of saying I just take my past experience to build a character off of and make him a lot better than I could ever have hoped to have been.
That's fine, Jack, because that brings us on to 2 points. One thing that Ali, wanted to talk about, one thing that I want to talk about. So I wanted to talk about, in fact, they kind of go hand in hand, actually. So one thing that always strikes me is that if you ask somebody, if you asked 100 people, how would you describe a Navy SEAL? I don't think anybody would describe you as creative, but there has to be so much creativity within those. Because if you look at what guys go and do, there has to be a real amount of, creative freedom within whatever you're doing in the operations, that you then, a lot of you go and do amazing things, which is something I find really interesting. So there must be, a lot of freedom given to use within operations.
Oh yeah, no, the creativity part is one of the most important factors, one of the most important attributes that you can have in special operations. And I'd say the military in general, probably life in general, but my experience is a very slim section of armed forces, and that's the special operations side of the house. But the enemy is certainly creative. The enemy is certainly adaptable, and a lot of the times whoever adapts faster downrange is the one that comes out on top. So creativity is one of the primary attributes we're looking for. Of course, we're looking for people that have physical courage, have moral courage, are resilient, are team players, of course, and that are creative. Like, that is one of the most important attributes that we're looking for in candidates. And one of the things that allows someone to excel in the SEAL teams is that creative gene, and being able to apply that creativity to an operation, to getting the job done. And I think that applies really to anything in life. We say the creative space a lot, and we think when we say creative space, we're thinking about filmmakers, and we're thinking about writers and sculptors and painters, and that sort of thing. But really, it applies to anything in life, any space. Being creative and being able to adapt and move forward are some of those important things in life, professionally and personally.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoke to, I don't even know how many Navy SEALs now, quite a few.
4 in total now.
4. It's amazing, you would always think of Navy SEALs as being, kind of rough and ready guys who get the job done. But everybody that we've spoken to has such a creative side to them. It's really interesting. It's a really interesting kind of dynamic to something that you wouldn't expect from, hardened military guys. And it's something that's really interesting. And that actually leads beautifully into the thing that Ali wanted to ask about.
Indeed,
well, before we get to that question, so I always kind of framed it as creative problem solving, aggressive, creative problem solving. When you're seeing a problem set downrange, I mean, you're looking to capitalize on momentum. You're looking for gaps in the enemy's defenses or whatever it may be. But really, it's that aggressive and creative problem solving downrange that is of vital importance.
Yeah, it actually reminds me, the way you're describing it there, Jack, is that just we were talking about Joe Rogan a moment ago, but Joe Rogan's quote about mixed martial arts, where he would say it's extreme decision making with dire physical consequences, and that's taken to the nth degree obviously with the work that you're doing, because the worst that happens in MMA is you get knocked out. Obviously, in the SEALs, there's a little bit, it's a further level of dire consequence, but very similar, that you have to have the ability to think and act and react and observe, orientate, and
that's why jiu-jitsu is such a that's why jiu-jitsu and boxing and mixed martial arts in general is such a has so many correlations to military, particularly special operations, where you have to very quickly also solve problems, but you can solve problems quickly and make things worse as well. So, and the enemy always gets a vote. So you can plan something on a whiteboard after studying multiple different operations and lessons learned in a classroom type setting, and you can come up with what you should, quote unquote, do in a certain tactical situation, and then everybody can go out for beers or go back to their families or whatever after that classroom whiteboard or sand table or whatever it might be. But downrange, that exact same situation, that answer that you came up with in a classroom isn't necessarily the one that works out downrange, because that enemy gets a vote, and things can go sideways. Even if you make every decision, quote unquote, the right one, things can still go sideways. And it also works the other way. Like sometimes you make a decision that you in a classroom or on a sand table, no way should you ever do that, and you do that downrange, and for some reason it works out. So there's just so many dynamics, so many variables at play that it's what a crazy environment to operate in. But it also, for me anyway, on this, now that I'm in the private sector and I'm following this next passion in writing, I'm solving problems on the written page. But if, I can go to sleep at night, I don't have to solve them quickly. I can sleep on it. I can go back and change it if I don't like how I came up with it the day before. I can edit. But I'm still doing the same thing. I'm still solving problems. I'm still solving them aggressively, but I'm doing it on the page, and the consequences aren't nearly as dire. If I mess something up, like it's okay. We're all going to walk away, and it's going to be all right.
Now, thinking quickly and making the situation worse. That sounds like Ali trying to escape my heel hooks.
It is. That's right. I'm not even going to lie. That was where the second part of the question was coming, because both me and Chris studied jiu-jitsu. We're lowly blue belts, just to put that out there. Awesome. I'm slightly lower than Chris, as he likes to point out, rightly so.
Quite a lot lower.
Quite a lot lower. Kicks my ass on a regular basis, and I'm okay with that at the moment. But when I was reading, and I read the 3-year novels relatively close again, but I think it's in Savage Son, you describe a jiu-jitsu fight. Or a session, and as I was reading it, I'm thinking only someone that studied jiu-jitsu, because you were talking about like pivoting for the right angle to catch a triangle, and then still looking for digging out the armbar if they posture out of the triangle. And I was reading it as someone that trains jiu-jitsu, going, Jack knows. So how long have you been training jiu-jitsu? Was that from the teams with the combatives program, or is it something you've taken up in addition to the sort of teams training?
Yep. So there's jiu-jitsu in all 3 books, and to include this 4th one that I'm working on right now called The Devil's Hand, which comes out in April. I'm doing the edits on that one right now. But I got into jiu-jitsu very early, so early 90s. With a guy called Wellington Megaton Diaz, and I was into boxing at the time and something called Jeet Kune Do, which is something that Bruce Lee came up with, and really it was the precursor of mixed martial arts, because he was taking things from Western fencing, Western wrestling. He was taking all these Filipino martial arts like Kali and Eskrima, Arnis, and applying all these things to really take what was useful in a street fight and discarding what was useless. So discarding katas and things like that were more ceremonial, or that really paid tribute to a time when you were fighting maybe in armor, and then you couldn't train with swords anymore like in Japan, and now you're training empty hand, but you're still doing moves that simulate having a weapon, even though the government had taken them from you. So he really separated what worked from what didn't. And then, of course, when we saw the mixed martial arts come on the scene in the early to mid 90s, took everything to a whole another level, of course. And the Gracie family really responsible for most of that as well. But so I got in very early. And back then, though, if you knew, how to mount, how to armbar, to get somebody in the guard, you like 4 moves. Like you were good. Like you were better than 99% of people out there. If you got in a fight, you were going to be, unless somebody came over and, a friend came over and stabbed you in the kidney or something like that when you were in the mount, like you were going to be okay, we're going to come out on top because nobody really knew this stuff, at least in the United States anyway. I'm not talking about Brazil or somewhere like that. But so I was in early. I knew my like four or five moves, so I felt pretty good as I went into the SEAL teams in the late '90s because it still hadn't caught on really that much. There was a couple guys that did it, but not very many. And then after that, after let's say '99, 2000, then it just exploded, of course. And but I think I plateaued way back then. I've been studying martial arts my whole life to get ready for the SEAL teams, to prepare myself mentally and physically for going to BUD/S and then going into the SEAL teams. But I thought, because there wasn't the internet back then, you just kind of assumed that once you got to the teams that you're going to do all sorts of combatives, and it wasn't called combatives back then, but you're going to do all sorts of like unarmed combat type training and all sorts of like knife fighting, well, whatever. No. We didn't really do any of that stuff once you got to the teams. So most guys, now there is a combatives program, and I'm sure it's much better now. But for most of my time in the teams, the guys that were really good at that sort of thing, the empty hand thing, they went out and did it on their own. They were like after work, they went and they sought out the people, the good jujitsu players, and they trained with them. So guys really had to take an interest on their own to get good at it. Now, of course, combatives, because a lot of the things we were doing with prisoner handling incorporated like you having body armor on, you having your rifle, and then you having to deal with somebody that you didn't really want to or need to shoot, maybe. And how are you going to deal with them? How are you going to zip tie everybody when you have this rifle banging around on you, that sort of thing. People clearing rooms maybe beyond where you are. So there are all these different things you're incorporating, but it wasn't necessarily, mono, e-mono, empty hand, no weapon type stuff, which is fantastic stuff, both for mindset, for that just aggression, for the problem solving aspect. There's so many great parts, but when you look at it from a time allocation standpoint, when I came in, you were learning to blow things up. You were learning small unit tactics. You were jumping out of planes. You're diving. You're going to Alaska doing cold weather warfare training. You're doing desert warfare training. You're doing urban warfare training. You're doing close quarters combat. You're doing all these other things. So really that unarmed combat type stuff fell to the bottom of the list, and most guys had to go out and do it on their own. So I feel very fortunate that I had done a lot of boxing, that I had done that jiu-jitsu early on, and I had this foundation. And I did a little bit here and there throughout my time in the teams, but I didn't dedicate myself to it the way I thought I was going to when I came in, because I was focused on all those other aspects of the job. Maybe if I hadn't had any experience before then, maybe I would have sought it out. But I was concentrating on learning how to be, as a brand new enlisted guy. Okay, now I'm the radio guy. How am I gotta learn this radio? And if this goes down, I need to have a backup. I need to learn HF communications. I need to learn SATCOM stuff. I need to learn all these other sorts of things as a new guy. Oh, now I'm jumping out of planes. I better learn how to pack the chute correctly. Better learn how to steer this thing and land the right way so I don't break something. Okay, now I'm diving. Whatever it is, I'm going to breacher school, learning all this stuff with explosives. So the guys are now depending on me not to blow us up and to put the right amount of charge on a door or whatever it is that we need to blow up or make entry into. So there's a lot of other things you need to do. But that's a very long way of answering that question, I know. But I feel so fortunate that I had that early experience with the martial arts, because still to this day and during BUD/S, I would think back to some of that early jiu-jitsu training and think about being on that mat and having a fresh person come in and just rolling. And that person gets up and leaves and another fresh person comes in and you're rolling. Like that's some of the hardest training that I ever did. And that's like mid 90s right there. And I still think about that today as being a very formative time for me, because it gave me that base, it gave me that confidence, it gave me that problem solving ability, it gave me that ability to deal with somebody, that close interpersonal violence, and not have that be something that I was just completely scared of. Not necessarily that you're ever going to be comfortable with it, but it's something that you're not scared of. You're not afraid to engage. And so I think all those things were extremely valuable, and all that bled over. It wasn't necessarily just only stuff that I got in the SEAL teams. All that early training bled over into my writing and that jiu-jitsu. So I am dated on my jiu-jitsu because I haven't done it for a while. So for those jiu-jitsu things, I do text Jocko and be like, hey, bro, if you're in Virginia Beach in like 2002 and you need to go train somewhere, like who would you train with? And hey, does this sound right? So I do throw those things off people that actually know what they're doing and have made it like their life's work and study to be able to do that stuff. Like same thing with the sailing portion in True Believer. Like I sailed a little bit. I can do like a laser, a little thing like that. But going across the Atlantic, I don't know what I'm doing. So I reached out to two very good sailors, one being Jimmy Spithill, who won the America's Cup, and is just an amazing guy. I'm a dear friend over the years. And I'm like, bro, does this sound right to you? And so he gives me his feedback. So I always reach out to the experts. Same thing with the Gulfstream, G550 and Savage Sun, those things they're jumping out of in the book. I sent it to Gulfstream. And one of the guys at Gulfstream was a big fan of the first two novels. And so he's talking to me about the plane and making sure I got things right. I just talked to him today. He's like, no, you don't measure things in knots. I had it in knots for some reason. He's like, we do it in Mach. And it's like a Mach 1.2 or something. So I reach out to the people that really know what they're doing for a lot of that stuff.
It definitely worked, because I totally had the belief that you were, like you were saying, like a ninja. Do you know what I mean?
I'm a little dated.
But it definitely worked. For someone, again, that knows a little bit, I was like, yeah, Jack knows. Jack knows enough that he's made it seem legit.
I know enough to be dangerous, probably more to myself these days. But as I was getting out of the teams, also I was back at our training command during my last year or two in, and that's when I had time to write the book and that sort of thing. So I started getting back into jiu-jitsu then. So I was going during my lunch break, and there was a group of guys that got together and trained during the last few years in. So I've been, here and there over the years, I've dabbled, but and then I've got my kids into it really early, so they've been into it for a while. I'm not into it right now, but they were. So it's such a valuable thing, I think, to get kids into, because there's so many life lessons that jiu-jitsu incorporates. Most important one probably being you either win or you learn. And it's just a good way to look at life, because you're going to get knocked down. Like, you're not going to win every time you roll. No chance. And same thing in life. Like, you're not going to win every time you go out. Every venture, you're not going to be a success. You're going to learn along the way. And that's what's the important part. And jiu-jitsu really teaches that and reinforces it over and over and over again. As you guys know, every time you hit that mat, you're going to learn something. And just like in life, that's what's the most important part, is then learning those things, but then not just learning them, but applying them going forward. So applying what you learn the next time you're on the mat, or if it's life, applying it the next time you go out, and it's not making the same mistakes over and over again. So it's all about building that base and then moving forward. So I'm a huge fan of jiu-jitsu in general.
Yeah, absolutely. We've said this multiple times now. We've learned something from everybody that we spoke to just doing this. The ability to listen and actually take down notes about what you want to ask them the next. So with anything, if you're doing it well or with passion, because the way you spoke about jiu-jitsu there was with a lot of passion. You could tell that it's something that you really like. So if you do something with passion, you will get better. If you really like it, it's I
know, I love all that stuff. And same thing, like in Jeet Kune Do back in the day, they were doing a lot of those Filipino martial arts I mentioned. And so you're doing the stick work and you're doing blade work, like with machete, and then you're using the smaller blade and learning all those angles and just how they're like maybe different strike with a stick than you would with a blade, but they're the angles are the same or similar. And so being able to incorporate that, and they're the same ones that you can use also without something in your hand or with a pen or whatever it might be. So I credit that time on the mat, that time studying martial arts, and then not just going and repeating what someone else does, but also studying, like, hey, where did these things come from? Like, what was going on in the world where people were coming up with this stuff, whether it was in the Philippines or in Japan or in China or wherever it was, Western boxing, Western wrestling, what was going on? Why were there these rules in place? Or was it meant to simulate something else? And do I need to discard some of this stuff because there are rules that were put in place at a certain time because of what was happening in the world? So really the intellectual side of it and studying where it came from, why it was developed, and then taking those and applying them in a modern context, like in a parking garage at night, with multiple attackers or something like that. Like, how do you apply some of those things to that situation? So I've always been fascinated with that, and I think it really helped along the way in the SEAL teams, and then also now as I write and I think through how to fight and what someone's background is that he's bringing to that fight, because I can't have just somebody that's never studied fighting or thought about violence all of a sudden in a fight with someone who has and come out on top. Like, no, they're going to get destroyed. And a lot of books don't do that because the authors haven't really spent that time studying interpersonal violence. So it's just something that I bring to the page because I'm passionate about it. I'm fascinated with it. It's something I've studied my entire life, and it's just a part of me. It's not something that I like feel like I need to go out and now learn so I can put it in a book. No, it is the book. Like these books are me. They're my experience, and they're that experience with violence. And I think a lot of people are surprised by that when they turn these pages, because it is so personal. And that does come across in the reading or in the narration. It's not just that I talked to somebody that was a sniper in Ramadi in 2006. No, I can take that experience and I can apply that to being behind the glass and pressing the trigger in a fictional sense. So it's not just the rolling and jiu-jitsu, it's all the other parts as well.
Now you mentioned boxing. That's my first love. What did you do in terms of boxing, Jack?
Yeah, so I trained in I didn't do amateur bouts. I did like a one that was amateur sanctioned or something like that, but not a real like amateur bout. So I trained with these guys that were hungry, these guys that were coming up, and that was going to be their kind of like their way out almost. It was going to be their ticket maybe. And so I just got in the mix with them. And gosh, Western boxing, if you do two things, or three things, Western boxing, Thai boxing, and jiu-jitsu. Like if you're going to study three things. Now most gyms incorporate all of those, but the boxing for me, and of course with Jeet Kune Do, you're adding a lot of elbows, knees, headbutts type things. But having that jab, having that cross, all those basics, like every guy needs to know those things, knows how to do that. Needs to keep your arm up, needs to cover that jaw, needs to keep your elbows in. Like those basics, like that's basic dude stuff that you need to do to protect this valuable gift of life. Like we're given this gift, and it's our responsibility to defend it, not to hope that someone else is going to allow us to live. No. And then you have a family, or you have a girlfriend, you have kids. Like that is your responsibility to take care of them. What does that mean? Well, at its base level, that means you're putting food on the table and you're defending them. You're learning to fight. And that's the base. That allows you to go forward and do everything else. But we're still connected. Like there's a very, very slim part of human history have we been able to not be good at those things. Have we been able to survive by going to the grocery store or calling the police if there's an issue? That is the smallest portion of human history. The rest of it, you had to be good at the hunt. You had to be able to put food on that table. You had to be able to defend the tribe, defend yourself, defend the family. So it's in us. It's innate in all of us. We're just kind of removed from it at this stage because we can allow ourselves to get soft, and you might make it through life just fine like that today. But if something happens and you're in a situation where you need to defend yourself or your family members, well, if you haven't tapped in kind of to those primal skills that you used to have to survive and to prevail, more importantly, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So I think it's in all of us, and just some of us identify that early on. Some of us come to it after we're in a bad situation. Some of us just stumble into the realization that maybe it's something we need to be able to do later in life. But for me, it's just always been there. But to go back to the boxing piece, like that's a staple. Like you have to be able to do these certain things. And also it's a great workout too. So a lot of people come to it through that. Like being on the mat and being in the ring in particular, sparring, like those are two of the toughest things physically that one can do. No doubt.
Yeah, 100%. We had that thrown into stark realization because when Scotland went into lockdown, all our gyms closed, and then for a short time window they reopened. And I had kind of kidded myself that I'd kept myself in shape during the early part of lockdown. And the first week back on the mat, I realised how useless I would have been in a real combat situation because my gas tank disappeared in about 32 seconds. And I was literally just like, I'm just going to have to turtle for 4.5 minutes and hope I make it to the end of this round. And all that beat bullshit that people say about, oh, that wouldn't work in the streets, I would just stand up. Absolute horseshit. Until you've been in that position and you're completely exhausted, you can't just stand up. You would 100% tap to Khabib. Do you know what I mean? Just because you're wearing a tap-out shirt and eating hot wings in a bar, that doesn't mean you're going to be able to fight off Khabib when he kicks off. But it's so true, until you're in that circumstance, you don't know. You've never been tested.
I was, I always laugh. I had a quite a few amateur boxing bouts, and
nice.
People, it was hilarious when people had these ideas about being able to fight. It's like until when the referee pulls you together and you look at that guy's eyes and he's trained to punch your teeth out of your head. I don't think people realize how difficult that is. And then there's no place to go. I mean, I know people that have left the ring because they got hit and they didn't like it, but you can't. You can't. A man can't do that. You have to.
There's something different about those bouts. Like I said, I had the one amateur sanctioned bout, so it wasn't really real one. It was just like the same rules and there was a crowd and everything. But man, that was so different being in there and having that crowd around and that energy from the crowd, everybody yelling. Like to this day, I still remember it. I didn't box as well as I did in training, just sparring. Like I was much better. And then I got in that ring and I was good. I won, but it was tough, and that was a different dynamic, having all those eyeballs on you and having that energy from the crowd and having those screams, but staying focused on destroying that person in front of you. So I didn't get distracted by all that, but it was different. It was just a different environment. So that was wild.
Yeah, I know. I had right at the end of my amateur career, I had one international bout in Scotland versus Norway, and that was a different thing again, because there was a realization that, holy shit, I'm representing my country. Fuck. We got, there was pipes there and all sorts of Scottish stuff.
That's awesome.
And that was something. That was a different kind of, like, it was almost like I've kind of made it now. But then the bell goes and the first round starts and you go, holy shit, this guy's really, really good. Now that guy actually boxed Kai Robin Havna. I think he fights for a world title. Maybe next year. I think he's got a world title fight. Nice guy. Although what was quite funny is I think I've told this to Ali privately before. As he was taller. I'm only 6 foot. He was like 6'3". And this is at 200 pounds. And in the third round, I hurt him, and he kept putting his head down. And he did it 3 or 4 times. And I know you'll understand this. So the red mist came over, and for a split second, he put his head down, and it was like I didn't know how to guillotine. So I tried to guillotine, like what now you call a guillotine. But I literally for 3 seconds was trying to kill him.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck. And if you knew how to guillotine, I would have, he would have been unconscious. But it was quite funny. I wish I knew some jiu-jitsu back then, and I would have put him to sleep, but I didn't, and I got my ass kicked. So it was fine. It was great, great.
Yeah, it's humbling too. It's humbling, and it gives you the ability to, and maybe not when you're younger, but certainly as you get older and wiser, and turn your experience into wisdom, which is also very important, is to be able to walk away from things and to not let some things bother you that maybe when you were 21 and wanted to test yourself, or 18 and wanted to test yourself, or whatever. It allows you to be like, all right, just walk away. Like it's okay. Especially today, like back in the early 90s, nobody knew this stuff, but now you have no idea. There's so many people training, so many people fired up about it, so many people watching MMA. So you have no idea who you're fighting these days. So it's best just to not.
I always say, when people are out in a bar or whatever, and the guys that whether it's girls or friends of mine who don't fight, and they're looking at the guy who's got the really tight shirt on, he's obviously on steroids, tattoos up his neck, and they're all going, oh, man, that guy looks tough, man. Maybe we should leave this bar. And you're going, that guy doesn't know fucking anything. And then you see like a little guy who's like 5'8", and you see the cauliflower not on his ears, and you go, yeah, this is the one. He's the one. He's the one you need to be. He's not scared of that big guy. It's
exactly.
Quite how expectations and reality are way apart in terms of people's ability to fight. It's quite funny. So yeah, it's but yeah, it's I love martial arts. Any fight sport. I tried a little bit of MMA sparring this year. Didn't particularly like getting hit in the face anymore. So I'll probably stick to just jiu-jitsu. But it's so much fun. So it's one of the other things I wanted to ask you about, and this is, we'll lose Ali here very briefly, was your love of Land Cruisers.
Yes,
I'm a car guy as well.
Nice. Yeah. So I think it all started back in Afghanistan when I saw those Hiluxes, and I saw because here we can't get Hiluxes in the United States. You know, the Tacoma over here, but back then in the early days in Afghanistan, they weren't purpose-built Hiluxes yet, meaning they didn't come out of some like factory with armor in them and like outfitted with superchargers and suspension and all the rest of it. It was just a stock Land Cruiser or a stock Hilux that we had our mechanics then add all this stuff to and put armor plating in and then do the suspension to be able to carry that weight and all the rest of it. But I saw those Hiluxes be able to do some amazing things overseas, and I was like, oh, must be a reason why all these people are using Hiluxes. And then I started noticing them in other places, and then noticing the Land Cruisers, and I was like, wow, look at this Land Cruiser. And then looked into the history of the Land Cruiser, and just really became just enamored with it. So it was like the Hilux was my gateway drug, obviously a more modern vehicle, and then looking at that lineage, that Toyota lineage through the Land Cruiser, that became my thing. So I have one, and it's the base for the Land Cruiser in the novels, and yeah, it's just I just love them. And also, there's this whole community of Land Cruiser aficionados that are drawn to the books because of the Land Cruiser. So it's so that's kind of cool as well. So yeah, I've just been a fan forever, and I have a FJ62, and I'm gonna add to that. I'm gonna get an FJ40, which is the Jeep one looking one, and add an 80 series, and just kind of have start building the collection.
Those things will go absolutely anywhere and run literally till the end of time.
Yeah, and I love using them as character development tools. So that's kind of how I use gear in the novels. Because when I see somebody, like what they're wearing, like what belt they have on, what pistol they're carrying, what kind of holster they have, what kind of blade they have, that tells me a lot about them. And I can make judgments based on those observations. Same thing with vehicles. And I think a lot of that comes from being a child of the 80s. Like every single TV show had a vehicle in it. Yep. And or something like the Airwolf had the Airwolf helicopter. Yeah. We had the Fall Guy truck. You had the Simon & Simon Dodge van. You had Knight Rider. You had all the Magnum's Ferrari. You had all these like characters that were vehicles. So it was very natural for me to incorporate those into the novel. And then also I use the Land Rover, Land Cruiser debate to develop characters as well. So one character likes Land Rover, like Defender 110. The other character, James Reese, the protagonist, likes Land Cruisers, and so they get to talk about that. Same thing, 9mm versus 45, leather holster versus Kydex, like all these things. Modern Solomon boots versus old Courtney boots from Africa. So I use all those different things to develop someone's character, just like kind of what beer somebody has. If they order, hey, I'll have a Coors Light, or they order some sort of a microbrew or whatever it is, like it tells me something about them. What whiskey they grab, they when they look at the shelf, like that tells me something about them, and so I use all that to develop my characters.
I would assume that the character that drives the Land Rover would be pissed off a lot because it obviously breaks down all the time, right?
That's in one of the first chapters where I talk about it. Yeah, I use the joke in there. Yeah.
How can I possibly know that?
He says the protagonist is like, hey, that Defender's been sitting there for like 10 minutes. You might want to check the oil. It probably all came out. So I use all the stuff in there, which is fun to do.
Yeah, I've had one, and they break down a lot. So yeah,
look cool. The Defender 110, not the new ones, but the old ones. The Defender 90s. They're such an iconic looking vehicle.
Get some now. There's a few companies in the UK really do some nice work on them. Sorry, Ali. Ali, can you go for a cup of coffee just now? He doesn't even have a driving license.
I don't even have a driving license.
But yeah, there's some companies do some real nice modifications on them.
I think I follow most of those guys on Instagram.
Yeah, amazing, really cool stuff. So, I would like to get. I like to, climb a lot of hills and do some wild swimming, and I really need to get something kitted out so I can get deeper and further into the Scottish Highlands. So
awesome.
I'm going to have to build at some point. I might try and build something myself because I love doing that as well. So one of the things actually I wanted to circle back to, kind of ties together again here. When you're talking about earlier on, but we're talking about your ability to provide for the family and stuff and all this stuff. So at the when we first went into lockdown, one of the things that I thought about was I knew where I can get what things got really bad. I knew where I can get water. I knew I could hike and get water because I knew where a fresh stream was. The only thing that I couldn't do is hunt. And I know that's something that you're big into. So that's something I will have to look. Genuinely, I said this to Ali,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to learn how to hunt because I don't like the idea of, and it's probably getting a little ridiculous, but then maybe not, the idea of not having food. So if I get to learn to hunt, then I don't have that issue anymore. So yeah, that's something I'm going to do. So I know you take the kids.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like that. So yeah, I'm gonna have to look into some of that. And we can't bow hunt. We can't bow hunt in Scotland. It has to be rifle hunting.
It's illegal to bow hunt in Scotland.
Bow hunt, but and it's I don't know yet because I haven't done it, but it's a real mission to get a gun.
Yeah, that's what I understand. I haven't done it yet. I want to get up there actually and hunt up there as well. I haven't done any hunting in any European countries, but I want to get over there because each country has its own like traditions and they're all a little bit different. They'll vary, and I just love the history behind some of those traditions. So I do want to get over there and do some hunting. But yeah, I'm going next week for mule deer in Colorado. I do take the kids. I think it's a great way to get away today, especially from all those electronic devices and distractions, because you're competing against that now. Once you let them in, once you crack that door, oh my gosh, they've got you. And there's a reason. I mean, they're definitely addictive. But you go to a couple places. So we like to do a river trip every year, meaning we put a raft in on a river and get to the bottom of a canyon, and there's no cell signal. So by default, and I'm guilty of it too, like I'm always working, building the readership, engaging with people on social channels and that sort of thing, because it allows me to do what I love, which is writing. And I do sincerely appreciate everybody that took a risk on me as a new author and that took the time out of their day to reach out. So I try to get back to everybody. But at the same time, when I'm at the bottom of that river canyon, I can't tell the kids, oh, hey, hold on just 1 second. I just got to return this real quick. Hold on. Like, you can't do that because there's no cell signal. Same thing with a lot of the places that we hunt. There's no cell signal, and you're out there, you're together. Maybe you're in a tree stand, maybe you're doing some spot and stock, but you're away from the electronic devices. You're out there, you're doing something primal, visceral, that they'll remember forever, and also something that allows them to provide to the family, to contribute to the family. So we're just not sitting down to dinner and throwing some stuff out there and eating and then getting back to whatever we were doing. No, we're putting some stuff on the table that they killed out there. And then we got that meat and we brought it back and it's in our freezer. And now we're talking about it. We're remembering that elk hunt as we're having that dinner. And they get to feel like, oh, well, mom or dad didn't just run out to the grocery store and get this. I did this. Like, I took this animal down, and then we went out there in the field and we field dressed this whole thing, and then we took it to the processor, or we took it home, and we took whatever it is. They're a part of it. They're part of that circle, rather than just they're a participant in it and a contributor to it, not just a consumer of something. And there's a big difference there, I think. And it also is a big part of being self-reliant. And for the kids especially, it gives them, I think, a greater sense of self in that they are connected to the past, to that tradition, to something that's useful that they can pass on to their kids, a memory that they can have of you. And it's not necessarily only of the hunt; it's the things you talk about while you're out there in the field, disconnected from all those distractions that we have these days, from that electronic leash that we have these days with our cell phones. So there's so many benefits to it that are more than just, oh, look, we got an elk, or we got a deer, or we got a rabbit, or whatever it is. No, it's that whole experience of being out there together that they'll remember forever and hopefully pass on to their kids, to allow them to be self-reliant as well. And at the same time, you're learning safety with firearms. So you're learning there's so many positives to being out there. There are very few negatives, if any at all, that I can even think of, attached to hunting and bringing kids out there to be a part of that process and that circle and that respect for the animal that you're putting on the dinner table. And that's something you don't get when you just rush down to the local grocery store and grab a frozen chicken off the shelf that does not look like a chicken anymore.
No. Yeah. Doesn't. It's I haven't been hunting yet, but I spend quite a lot of time in the highlands, climbing our hills and stuff alone, and it's something that I love. So much peace in it, and there's so much a lot of time for like self-reflection and character building. And I've said to Ali, I think we're it might have been Bert Soren we're talking about this, and one of my favourite things to do is be alone on a hill at night, just a head torch, and it's I can't even describe it. This is good job I'm not an author. There's a way that it's such a grounding feeling of just being at peace with everything around about you. And also, if you make a mistake, that could be it. There's also
That's right
for that error. And if something does happen when you're in the wilds, nature doesn't care. The world keeps moving. Something will eventually eat you. And I love that. I love that stuff. I really do like it. So hopefully I'll get some hunting done at some point, and hopefully come add another string to the bow, as they say.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's like the mountains are neutral, like they do not care. But they call a lot of us. So it's just getting out there, and a lot of it I think is just getting away from all these things today, all these distractions, and allows you to it's meditative being out there. And then also knowing that, hey, if something does happen, you roll an ankle, you break a leg, whatever, well, once again, you better be able to take care of yourself. You better be self-reliant. You better be prepared as best you can. And then once again, well, if you make it out of some of those situations, take those lessons and apply them going forward. So the next time you're out there and roll the ankle, maybe you're a little more prepared. So that's just all part of life.
I always have quite a comprehensive kit when I go out, but ever since we spoke to Clint Emerson on the podcast, and I bought both all the editions of his 100 Deadly Skills, and I was reading that. So one of the things that I did add was Ali's got a Leatherman, so I ended up buying a Leatherman, to put in my bag just in case. It's another thing that you add. You listen to these things and you go, okay, well, if Clint Emerson says have a good multi-tool in your bag, you should probably have a good multi-tool in your bag. It's probably not a bad idea. So I'm about
to continue the Leatherman tradition. I've got 3 kids, Jack, 2 teenage sons and a 11-year-old daughter, and my oldest son turns 18 in January.
Nice.
And when I was 18, I bought myself a Leatherman Wave, one of the old school Leathermans. You're talking 24 years ago, man. Jesus.
The Wave's my favorite. I still love the Wave.
So I've said to Adam for about the last 4 or 5 years, when you turn 18, I'm going to buy you a Leatherman so that you've got the multi-tool. And then Logan, who's my other son, he turns 18 the following year. So he'll get presented with one as well. And then I just need to decide what I'm going to get for my daughter when she turns 18.
Leatherman.
Leatherman as well. Get her one as well. Even
exactly.
As you were saying, even getting the kids away from the electronic devices and taking them out for a while. My daughter fights it. She doesn't want to at first, but once you get her away and you get her into that bit of space and a bit of nature, at first she's still a little bit. I don't know. Do you have the word stroppy over there in America?
No,
it's like it's like kind of like a mild tantrum, a little bit petted lip.
Okay.
So she gets a bit stroppy, and then
I'm gonna start using that because our daughter.
That's your word. That's your word now.
Yeah, that's your word. She gets it after that 10-15 minutes, and then she's like, she's present. Do you know what I mean? She disconnects from everything. It's such a massive difference. Massive difference.
One of the things that I liked from the your interview with on Joe Rogan was you're talking about your daughter shot an elk, and it was just one of those things you go, that seems crazy. Is she 10 years old? Is that no sorry,
she was 10 when she got her first elk, and then she got her second elk when she was 13, I think, or maybe 12. But anyway, she has 2 amazing elk now, and she has these great memories, these great photos of it, and when she gets older, she'll always have that. So it's a pretty cool thing. And then to be able to share that around the dinner table, it's there's so many benefits.
As somebody that doesn't have any kids, I have a niece and a nephew that I try and pass my wisdom on to, but it must be quite comforting as well, knowing that you have a daughter who's absolutely capable of handling herself and being self-sufficient, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And she got I introduced her to jiu-jitsu very early on, so she was doing jiu-jitsu up until until a few years ago. But she was very serious about it for quite some time. So at least there's that base there. She does some other things now. She kind of grew out of that, but maybe she'll find her way back to it at some point. But at least she has that foundation.
Yeah, she'll come back to it definitely. That's one of the cool things is you'll always circle back to these things because at some point somebody it might be a UFC fighter, a Ronda Rousey type, and go, oh, I like that looks cool. So, but yeah, we're are we over an hour now, Ali? Are you
just about heading into that? Are you still okay for time, or do you need to get away, Jack?
Yeah. I'm good for now, and then. Yeah, I think if you hear anything outside, if the kids just got home, I think from school, Fridays are their half days. But it's time to start juggling kids here soon and putting the edits on this fourth novel. Put that one to rest, and then finish up the last 2 scripts for the Amazon series, and then jump right into book number 5 and start getting that thing outlined and ready to go. And then after I get that outline, kind of the beginning, middle, and end. Not necessarily knowing what every chapter is going to be, but have that flow down, know how I want to start it, know that theme, and know where it's going to end up, and then get it as outlined as I can, and then hop right in and start knocking that thing out.
One of the things I've been freaking Chris out with over the last couple of weeks when I've been rereading I'd read your first novel, The Terminal List, about a year ago, maybe, and then I reread them. And read books 2 and 3 as well just recently. The enhanced interrogation scenes in The Terminal List and in Savage Son. Now, I thought Terminal List was bad with the piano wire, and then I got into Savage Son, and you got into the bit with the Capacian. That's kind of that's how we pronounce it over here. Yep. Ground it down, injected into the eyeball, injected into the bladder. That was.
Don't give away too many. Don't give away too much.
No. I won't give away any more than that. But when I was reading it, especially the second one in Savage Son, I was cringing at the thought of that. I mean, the first one was just that, oh my God. Like, as I say, I won't give too much away for anyone that's planning to read the books, but it made my knees tuck up to my chest, shall we say.
Yeah.
And then the one in Savage Son, it was savage.
I do get a lot of questions about that one, and I keep exactly kind of where I came up with that to myself. But I wanted the violence to be thoughtful. That was very important to me. And then because I've read so many where you just shoot somebody in the leg or whatever, shoot them in the other leg, or I wanted the violence to be thoughtful because they were going to be violent, but I wanted it to be thoughtful violence. So in the first one, I've explored that, of course. Second one and third one, fourth one as well here that I'm just finishing up. But I kind of wanted that to be a hallmark of the books, is that each one there's something that people haven't seen before in that realm or thought about before in that realm, and so that. Anyway, so far, it's worked, and that particular chapter that you're talking about in Savage Son is one that comes up quite frequently in interviews because I haven't had anybody tell me that, oh yeah, I've heard of that before, or I thought of that before, or like no one's ever said that to me. There are probably a few people out there that maybe have, but very few, and I think for most people, it's a little eye-opening.
Definitely. Yeah, and I told my 2 teenage sons about it, and particularly the first one in Terminal List. My 16-year-old son just was horrified at the thought of it being a 16-year-old guy. And
yeah, got it. Yeah, that was a crazy one. I don't want to ruin too much about that scene. No. It's a good one.
Oh man, that was.
It'd be interesting if they bring that into the second season of because the first season of the Terminal List is just the Terminal List, and I guess if there's a second season, they'll base that off how well the first one does. But if there's a second season and it's based on True Believer, it'll be interesting to see if they do the piano wire deal in that one. It's I haven't seen that on film before.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
That's so savage. It's so.
One of the other things I was going to ask you, Jack, and I've noticed when you've been on the podcast a couple of times, you picked a mug up. I suppose the word I'm going to use is the fetishization of coffee. Is that a team's thing? Because I just listened to the Black Rifle Coffee Company on Joe Rogan a couple of weeks back, and they were talking about you, and you seem to be, shall I say, infamous about your coffee. Is that a fair phrase to use?
Yeah,
is that something that,
probably.
again, is that a bit of Reese that's in you, or you're in Reese at that time?
That's it. So it was also important for me to humanize the character, the protagonist of the novels, and not just have someone that was like a robot or good at everything. So he is not good at the surveillance side of the house, because the surveillance was something we kind of did here and there in the SEAL teams, but not the way that he has to do it in the book. And there are some teams now that focus more on that, developing human type networks. So doing like the human intelligence side of the house, building those networks up. So since September 11th, that's become important, but it wasn't something that I was really intimately involved with. So it's not something that I am good at. And so I wanted my character to not be good at a few things. I also wanted to humanize him a little bit, because most of the people that are protagonists that have the backgrounds that my character does in the novels, both in movies and in books, they like their coffee black. That's just the man thing to do. Well, I happen to like my coffee with a little honey and cream. Like, that's just how it is. And, and it drives the Black Rifle coffee guys crazy, because when they make coffee, it's so good. Like, it's amazing how they do it, and the pour over and the whole deal. But, for me, I throw it's in the grinder, it's in the machine, and it comes out, and we're juggling kids, and it's chaos all the time. And I stir in my honey and my cream. So I wanted to make the character a little more relatable, and he likes his coffee that way too. So I brought that to the character in the novel. So yes, this one right here, there's coffee. There's coffee in here, there's cream in here, and there's honey in here. We'll see.
I love honey and tea.
Exactly.
I love honey and tea, not in coffee, but love it in tea. Some nice honey and tea is a. That's like the eighth wonder of the world. It's one of those beautiful things. It's like a secret that nobody doesn't know. And I don't. People might shit on me a little bit because I like honey in my tea, but I like honey in my tea. It's nice.
I get it. I get it.
One of those things when people talk about, the way that the guys make that, any of these guys who make really good coffee, and it seems like it's one of those things where, I guess it's the same with anything, but it's just coffee. Like, how do you make coffee better? It's one of the, it's when people go, running is running, or swimming is swimming, or jiu-jitsu is just fighting. Like, how can you not be better at it? It's like, it doesn't make sense until these guys, until you actually seen them do it, and you drink the coffee, then you would go, holy shit, this is unbelievable. It seems, like, how, I don't understand.
And then you really notice bad coffee. It's kind of like wine, and that if you never have good wine, like, you're fine. Like, but as soon as someone introduces you to good wine, then it's very difficult to go back to horrible wine, because you didn't know it was horrible before. Same thing with coffee. It's just coffee. It was burnt. Maybe you're in the Navy, you get it in the Chief's mess or whatever, and it's just this stuff that just comes out of this thing, and it's dark, and you drink it, and it keeps you awake, and okay. But then someone introduces you to actual coffee, and how they roast it, how they flip it. Like, when you're getting some of this mass-produced stuff, they just need to get it out there, right? They need to put it in these cans and get it out there. So they're putting it through very fast under these crazy high heats. They're burning it, essentially. And so that's what you get in most coffee that we grew up with. But now, when you do really good coffee, you have people like Evan Hafer at Black Rifle that really know what they're doing, and they get the temperatures just right, and they flip the beans over, and they're not burnt, and it's a totally different experience than just getting quote unquote coffee from some of these bigger places. So that artisan type coffee in these small batch roasters is so different than just getting a can off the shelf at the grocery store from some big company that you've heard of that just has to get it out there. And they're making a ton of money, so they're just burning it, getting it through the machines and putting it into these cans, and that's what they're doing. But if you never knew or never tasted the good artisan small batch roasted coffee, you wouldn't even know. So, I don't know. There's a couple of ways to go through life. Cheap wine and burnt coffee. You'll be happy as a clam as long as you never try good coffee and good wine.
I feel this way now about cider. I don't even know, cider's really a big thing in America, but we have cider, quite a lot of cider in the UK, and I feel this way with cider. So people buy cider and they buy, Magners or Recorder Leg is one of these, and they're just, fruit flavored, sugary ciders. Yeah. Drink them, and go, oh, cider's amazing. You like. that's not fucking cider. This is not cider. Now, this is a proper cider. And you should be able to see bits of apple, and you could taste the. And I get really annoyed when people talk, the same kind of idea. But yeah,
same deal. Same deal. I mean, and with whiskeys and all that stuff too. If you only just have one kind of whiskey that's not the best, you don't even know any better. So it can save you a lot of money, I guess.
My dad used to drink horrible coffee. He was in the Royal Navy for 22 years.
Yep.
So he used to drink out, as you say, out the kind of mess, and he used to drink out of a 3.5 pint mug, 3.5 pint of coffee. He used to drink about 8 a day. So think about how much coffee. And he used to take it with milk and salt. He used to put salt in it because that was the Royal Navy tradition, was to put salt in it. So he used to drink like coffee with like a splash of milk and a grind of salt into it, and that's how he would drink his coffee for years. And like say 3.5 pint mug. So that's,
dude, I'm gonna put that in a book. That's fantastic. I've never heard of that before. Actually, I'm gonna try it tomorrow. I'm gonna put a little salt in my coffee and a little milk and see what it's like. I'm 100% doing that tomorrow. That's how
that was. My dad was in the Navy 75 to 97. So he was like a little bit old school Navy, Royal Navy particularly, and that was the old tradition that he'd been brought up with by the chiefs at the time, the chief petty officers, was you had to have salt in your tea. I don't know if it maybe went back to the days of like scurvy and trying to keep guys with a certain level.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? One of those kind of things. Who knows?
Right.
But yeah, and as far as I know, he still has still has salt in his coffee.
Interesting. I'm gonna check that out. I'm very curious now. Might do it right after we get off here. Yeah.
There will be an interesting backstory to that, I bet you, because there must be something.
There must be something. Exactly.
It'll go back to pirate ships or something, almost certainly.
Yeah.
Do you have? Did you have much, dealings with our UK military guys in deployment?
I worked next to SAS in 2006 in Baghdad. So I think they came out with a group that I was working with at the time once. So we were in close proximity to one another. We had where we were set up there in Baghdad. It was pretty sweet little spot. So so they had a house, we had a house, our Army Special Operations guys had a house. So we were all kind of like lined up there. And so they were crushing it out there. So but not too much. Did some stuff with SBS early on, I think 2004 maybe. But yeah, those guys crush it, I mean, it's just amazing. Such a history and such tradition.
One of the things that we've had a couple of British guys on as well, and one of the things that they were saying is they don't have the kit that the Americans have, so they have to work a little bit harder to get the results. You guys have I don't know because I haven't been there, but you guys have a lot of kit, and our guys don't have as much, so they have to work that little bit extra.
Yeah, and it didn't used to always be that way. They used to have the kit, and we did not. I remember wearing GSG9 German boots from Adidas back in the early or the late 90s, because no one else really made like a running shoe-ish, boot-ish type thing, except for them from Adidas. And then some of the kit. I mean, really, a lot is based on SAS. Like our Delta guys, that their whole thing's based on SAS, because the first commanding officer of that unit went through SAS training, and so we took those lessons and then brought them back to the States to build our special operations capability, because we didn't really have one. And then in the late 60s into the 70s into the early 80s, of course, with terrorism on the rise, really a new threat, we weren't prepared to deal with it. We didn't have units that were whose mission focus was the counterterrorist mission, and Europe started dealing with that problem set well before we did, obviously. So they developed the capability before we did. So we started. So all our lessons learned back then came from really European special operations units, and we just took and applied it to us in the U.S. and applied it to some lessons from Vietnam. Typically, it was the Vietnam guys that were developing these units in the late 70s and early 80s, and so we have definitely have a connected heritage in that sense, no doubt about it.
The guy who founded the SAS, there's a monument to him just out towards Doon. Have you been there, Ali? Have you?
Yeah.
The monument, is it David Stirling?
David Stirling, Lieutenant Colonel David Stirling. The old long range desert patrols in North Africa.
That's right. It's his birthday on Sunday.
Yeah.
So I like to always do like a little history thing on Instagram and Twitter and stuff. So it's Jack Carr USA on Instagram. But I try to do little history things here and there, and one of the things that I do is for his birthday.
Yeah,
I saw the one today about Paris.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah, one of the things I'll do, Jack, is the next time I'm passing out that way for work, I'll stop and I'll send you a picture of the monument.
Awesome! That'd be awesome.
I'll send you one. I don't know when I'll be out there, but I'll be out there at some point and send you because it's quite, he had quite a big impact on Special Forces worldwide. So
no doubt about it. Then he got into the early stages of what we'd call today contracting or private military companies after he left military service. So there's a whole history there as well. But what a fascinating individual. He has a book called Rogue Heroes that's fantastic about him and creating the SAS and really that history of special operations. So just an incredible guy, no doubt about that.
Is that where you're interested in and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but the Selhouse Scouts, is that come from your study of counterinsurgency and just military history in general? Because that's a recurring theme throughout the book or books as well.
Yep, I've always been fascinated with that. Fascinated with the tactical tracking side of the house, the history of Africa, particularly from really the end of World War II up through the late 90s, mid 90s in particular. But that period in the 60s and 70s, where you have those guys really developing those pseudo-terrorist operations, counterinsurgency, dealing with them, taking their lessons learned, and particularly in Africa with the Selous Scouts, is doing the man tracking and doing that better than anybody has ever done it before. So I wanted to take some of that history and apply it to certain characters in the novels because it wasn't something that I'd seen explored in books over here anyway. And people love those characters. I get direct messages all the time from people saying they want to explore this family. The Hastings family is a family in the novels, and they want more of that background. And it might be something I explore in future novels.
It was interesting because my wife's cousin is married to a woman from Zimbabwe, and he spent 25 years or so living in Zimbabwe, and they got forced off their farm, as you kind of hint at in, I think it's in the second book that you kind of
Savage Son.
And you go through with the Hastings kind of, and again not giving away too much from the third one, but how they all know how to defend the homestead.
That's right.
Because of what they've gone through. Again, I won't give away, hashtag no spoiler alerts, but they know how to defend because of that experience in Zimbabwe with under Mugabe.
That's right, and some of that stuff I got from there's a real person that I based that character on that grew up in then Rhodesia, then came to the United States and currently lives in Montana, and she lent me 4 or 5 different books from Africa that really talk about that history during that time period. And when there's one line in the third novel where, if you remember that piece, when the matriarch of the family is about to start defending the homestead, she's handing out the weapons, and there's a line, and no one's really brought it up as saying, oh, that could never happen, and I expected it because it is such a powerful paragraph in a line, and it's a real line from somebody that was defending the homestead in Rhodesia. She was the matriarch of the family. The husband was away at war elsewhere, and she was there defending the homestead. And she said, if you die this day, die well. And it's a real thing. Like it's somewhat, it's incredible. So I took that and I applied it to fictional narrative, of course, but with someone that had a background from that time and place.
It's, I think it's I've really, as somebody who doesn't read an awful lot, it's really interesting to see the thought process. It's not something that's thrown together quickly. It's something that you obviously think about and plan and knit things together really, really well. And obviously have a lot of contacts. We speak to people about certain things to get these details. Is like anything, if you're trying to armbar somebody, right? It's the details. It's the details that make things believable and obviously wildly successful as well, I guess. So yes, it's nice to
appreciate that. Yeah, no, I want to publish these at some point. There's been so much going on, I haven't had a chance. But for those fight scenes, when you're talking about those details, I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of people that live in these different realms. And a really good buddy of mine has choreographed out these fight scenes for me. Like, he lives and breathes combatives, but a lot of blade work. And so I'm like, hey, bro, this is what I want to do. Here's the outline. Like, here's kind of how I want this to go down. And then he will take a video and he'll put on his nods, and in this room, and he'll have somebody else in there, and he'll go through the whole thing for me, and I can watch it over and over again, like what I wanted to do, and then I'll make little morphs here and there or whatever. But I get to see it and replay it over and over as I write down, so I can look for those details in what he's doing. So it's not just me in my mind thinking, how would I do this like that? I can actually see it. So it's like choreographed like a movie fight scene. And then I get that and I'm watching it on my phone because he sends it to me there. And then I'm taking that and applying those little details to the paragraphs as I'm writing these fight scenes. So it's pretty cool. I'd like to publish those at some point when I get around to it.
That would be cool.
These details are really interesting. And it's also nice to see, how passionate you are about everything as well. It's not your fourth book's coming out, and obviously it hasn't taken its toll at all. You're still incredibly passionate about these things, and it's always very nice to speak to somebody when they have a clear passion for something. They're not just doing something to get paid, or they really live it, breathe it, and it's their baby, and they to do it. It's really nice to see that from people.
Oh yeah, I mean that passion for service, that calling. Really, both of these things have been callings, and I don't look at them as jobs. I've always looked. There's a reason we call it the profession of arms, not the career of arms. Same thing. It's a profession of writing. So I look at these things as professions rather than jobs, if that makes sense. And for me, there's a difference. And I felt that same passion I feel that same passion for writing that I did for service in the SEAL teams, and wanting to be the best operator in the SEAL teams. Well, I want to be the best writer I can be now. And I don't just want to recreate something that someone else has already done. I want to build on that legacy, on those giants that really inspired me to take this path. And I look at it as my responsibility to move that ball forward, whether it's by a yard or by 50 yards or whatever it is, by a degree maybe, but move the genre forward in some way, shape, or form. And the initial way that I think that I've done that is through those real experiences downrange and applying them to that fictional narrative. But for me, I'm not just trying to recreate what's already been done. I'm trying to move the ball a little bit forward, so those people that now come behind me can do the same thing and keep moving the genre forward. But what's important about that is to know the history. And I think it'd be very difficult to just wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to be a writer. I should go back and read some of these things that got me here. Who are some of the giants in this industry that moved the ball forward on their own? Well, I've been doing that since I was a little kid. So I think it would be very hard to go back and recreate that now, because you have certain biases, you have experience of your own, you're looking at things through distorted lenses because of your life experience. But back then, if you're reading something in 1979, 1981, 1983, 1999, you don't have those yet, and you're experiencing it in a much more pure form, I think. But I was being interested in it back then. I've read so many of these books that you couldn't do it today. You couldn't just start one day at age 40 or age 50 or age 60 when you have a family and all these other responsibilities and everything else. So I feel very fortunate that I read all these guys growing up and have a good understanding of the history of the genre, and reading like Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell, and Rogue Male by Jeffrey Household, First Blood by David Morrell in 1972. So all these guys that moved the genre forward, Ludlum, Le Carre, of course, like all these guys that moved it forward and did their part to get it where it is today. So I feel kind of obligated to continue that tradition and honor their legacy by making these books the best I possibly can.
Yeah, and and I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you, but they've generally jumped to the top. My list always had two people. When they talk about like the Mount Rushmore of whatever, and my two faces on the Mount Rushmore at the time were Tom Clancy. I first read Cardinal of the Kremlin was the first one I read of him back in '94, maybe.
Nice.
Neck of the Woods when I was at high school, and then about early 2000s I started reading Patrick Robinson and his books around because they kind of jump between the Navy SEAL world and the Royal Navy world. So one of their main characters is a submarine captain, and my dad had started off in subs, and they talk about the Holy Loch and Faz Lane, and it was places I had visited. So when and there's one of his main characters lives in Edinburgh, where I also used to live. So when he was talking about the character walking down a specific street, you kind of shut your eyes and sit back and go, I know exactly where he's going. So they were the two that I've always held in very high regard. And yours are right up there, genuinely. I've put you up on the Mount Rushmore as well, because they have that genuineness. The only thing that kills me is I keep having to stop to jump to Google because you're such a gear gang. And I don't know what the weapons look like, not being an operator or being involved. So like you said during the chat, you're like, oh, they carry a very specific type of knife. It's not just like, a 5.56 semi-automatic. It's a very, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. Oh, okay. And then a couple of chapters on, you'll be like, and I was aware of the Dragunov sniper rifle. And then you said, but they don't use that anymore. You use this new one. I was like, oh, damn. Back to Google. Let's find out what that is now.
Yep, exactly. And I love, I make people do a little work in the novels. You got to come and do a little work. In some things, I leave little hints to certain people or certain things that have happened throughout history that if people are interested in it, then they could jump to Google, or if not, they can just kind of skip over it. And like for the sniper rifles, so some people might just be like, oh, it's a rifle, keep going. But somebody might be interested and then go back and be like, oh, now I see, like, this is really cool. So it's possible to just jump over some of those things, but it's there for the people that are interested, and for the people that already know what they are, it adds that little bit of credibility. Like, he didn't just say Russian rifle. He got this right. And I'm sure I'll mess something up at some point. And I'm sure in today's day and age, people will let me know because there's so many ways to reach out these days. But that's just how it goes. And a great part of that is that that engagement is wonderful and helps you build a readership and establish a relationship with that readership and a trust with that readership, which is so important, especially today, I think. But now people can check you also. So once it's out there in print, like if you messed it up, like they can tell you, they can look through that research and they'll let you know. So I'm sure I'll mess something up at some point, but so far I think I've been pretty good to go.
This is one of the scary things about recording things and uploading them is once you've said it, it's said, and you can't go back at it. It's said. So
we call that a fire and forget weapon. So that round is downrange. You can't pull it back. Pull it back. Like it's gone. Better worry about the next one.
Yeah, we've only ever had in the whole. This is episode 48 we're recording just now with yourself, Jack, because we started it right at the start of lockdown. Me and Chris just decided we've been talking about it for a while. We should start a podcast, and then when lockdown happened, we thought, well, no one's doing anything. Let's start it. And we've only ever had one person give us a negative comment the whole time, and it was some random American person accused us of fat shaming. And to this day, we cannot work out when we very possibly and probably did. But she came out and she commented on the video, silly Goose Gang are disgusting, fat shaming people. This is disgusting in this day and age. And me and Chris went, okay, maybe we did.
Yeah, people are going to get upset about something. You can't really help that. And that's kind of what I do when I read these negative reviews. I do that every now and again because they're kind of interesting to read. But it's always amazing to me how much time people put into being negative when they can choose to do something positive. Or let's say if they don't like a book, okay, well, they can move on to one they like. But instead, they choose to spend even more time telling other people with a medium that's subjective, like art is, that how much they hate and also things that aren't even true you can say and put it out there, and they're out there. I mean, but hey, it's just interesting to me how much bandwidth people expend on being negative when they can choose to turn that bandwidth towards in a direction that's positive, and probably be a lot happier people, and probably make those around them a lot more happier as well. So, but hey, that's just how it goes.
100%, 100% agree. It's you're not going to go anywhere and find anybody who's successful. I'm not going to go to Instagram and look at Jack Carr calling somebody an asshole, and he's your boxing ability sucks, or your books. It's just not going to happen. You've got too many things to do, and I don't know why people do that. I guess they're unhappy, but
it's an interesting dynamic, that's for sure, and it's kind of self-perpetuating as well, because you get to look at all these things on Instagram, and you get to see someone's best second of a day that's been put through filters and everything else, when right behind the camera it's maybe chaos, or they're miserable, or who knows. But then that makes you feel even worse, because your life's not like that, and then you get to lash out at someone because there's no barrier between you and being able to express yourself like there was 30 years ago, when you had to write a letter to the editor and sit down and write something out longhand, or type something out, find an address, put a stamp on it, put it in the mail. It would then arrive in an editor's inbox on their actual desk, that they then have to open, read, and say, oh, this person is crazy, and throw it in the trash can. Well, now that crazy person whose letter used to go in the trash can, no barrier. It's out there. It's up there. And so it's an interesting dynamic. So those things that are the bad parts like that, there's also the good parts of being able to engage with people, to thank people, in my case, because I feel so fortunate. Like I said, the people took a risk on me as a new author, and then really the reason these books are successful, and the reason that Savage Son made the New York Times list, is because people took a risk on a new author, and then they told a friend, because this thing, and I was kind of hoping that I'd go on Joe Rogan before the third novel came out to help get it on the New York Times list, but it was after. It made the New York Times list after that. Same thing. I was hoping Chris Pratt would say something and post something about it before, like that, during that first week, which is the most important week for an author when his book comes, or his or her book comes out. But instead, it was after, which now I love, because it means that this was a grassroots effort. It was from people, it was from tactical shooters, it was from martial artists, it was from hunters, it was from readers, it was people that took a risk and then told a friend, whether they did that physically, or they told it to their one follower on social media, or their 10 million followers on social media. But it's a modern day word of mouth that really made these things a success. It wasn't because I had a platform, because I didn't. It wasn't because I went on a news show, because I didn't. It made the New York Times list before any of that happened, which now I am very thankful for.
Yeah, that's me and Ali have talked about this. With doing this podcast, is we didn't want any press, to buy any press, to advertise what we're doing, or ask people for favors to share it or anything. It's like, let's do something. Let's do it as good as we can, without being fake. Let's be ourselves, and let's build this thing. And if it becomes something, it'll be because we did a good job. And we're slowly getting there. So hopefully, and I love that. I think it's got a lot more value. If you had went on Joe Rogan, and it was listened to 5 million times, and your book done amazing because of that, yeah, you'd still accept it, but it means more to do it the other way, the hard way. It means a lot more, right?
It does. It really does. And I was kind of like, I've known Joe for a long time, and I was like, man, why haven't I been on that show yet? But I'm so glad that he did not have me on until after he made the New York Times list. I'm so thankful for that. Do
you think, Jack, that having spoke to a few people that know him, and they all say he's a really nice guy, do you think he did that deliberately to try and he maybe didn't want you to it to happen that way he wanted it to happen the way it did happen. Do you think he's the kind of guy that thought that far ahead?
That is a good question, and I'm going to ask him. I'm definitely going to ask him that question because I'm curious. I don't think so. I think people are just so busy, but I'm not sure. I'm just guessing. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. But I'm definitely going to ask him that.
You would say, I think Jack could do this on his own. He doesn't need my help, and that'd be cool. Yeah, it'd be a cool thing if he did do that. That would be super cool. But like you said, it might just be a coincidence. But yeah, I think that would be a cool thing. For him to have done.
I'm definitely going to ask. Yeah, same thing on that Tucker Carlson show, but it was well after that it made the New York Times list. So, those are some big audiences there. But all those big ones happened after it made the New York Times list. So now it does. You're right. I'm so thankful that none of that stuff happened. And beforehand, I was hoping all of it would happen ahead of time to help it make that list, because it's important to make that list as far as growing readership, hitting a different audience that only kind of looks at those type of books. So it's an important step in the journey. But I'm so glad now that it happened all organically, all naturally, grassroots, people telling friends, hunters, shooters, martial artists. Like, I love that part now. That means a lot to me.
Awesome. No, we've been now taking your time for like an hour and a half.
Yeah, 90 minutes.
We don't want to take any more of your time. I know you're a busy guy, but yeah, I'd like to say thank you very much for giving us your time. And if you ever need any little details about something, if you're doing something about a Scottish guy or anything here,
Dude, seriously, I might reach out to you guys. I want to get back up there. It's been a long time since I've been there. So at some point, next time I'm there, I'll let you guys know, and it'd be awesome to meet up for a drink.
Oh, definitely, 100%, 100%. Well, as I say, Jack, really appreciate you've been extremely gracious, and delighted that you were able to come on. I've got to talk to you about 3 books that I've absolutely loved. It's been really good fun.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. I appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you in person after this current craziness is over.
Definitely.
Bring a gi with you.
I gotta start working out.
Okay,
awesome.
well,
you guys take care.
You too, Jack. Episode 48, Silly Goose Gang podcast, done and dusted. Just take us.
The Silly Goose Gang podcast.